Right. While we wait for either Dror or Yoav to join, continuing with our earlier conversation on just keeping track of the status of completion of the P2P mempool. Dan and Sharif, if you can give us an update on where you guys are with the feature complete.
Yeah, I've been out of office for a while, but we have a bunch of code written. I deprioritized it to get my feedback out there.
Mhm.
So I have PRs up for every piece of the feedback except for the changes to the discovery portion.
Yep.
I'll get that change. I'll get that PR up in a second, at some point today. With regards to the code itself, I think when we hash out some of those changes, it should be about a week of work for us to be compliant with the mempool. Next week is U.S. Thanksgiving, so we're out for a couple of days at the end of the week. But if we could work through those changes pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and get those updates into the PR, or sorry, get those PRs merged into the spec, we should be able to kind of within a week after those changes turn around and get our implementation out
Okay.
there.
Sharif, yourself?
Yeah. Okay. Right now, the bundler can connect with Scanda. It can do discovery.
Mhm.
It can subscribe to the gossip topic. It can exchange user operations. Like the only and I have implemented like almost all the instructions. The user operation per hash. Yeah, all the data structure spec. Like there is one RBC I haven't finished its implementation yet. It's about the RBC call when the bundler boots. It asks for all user operations from other bundlers. This part is not implemented yet. Yeah, so yeah, I hope I can get a working implementation soon enough.
Okay. I mean, the reason I'm asking, Dan, I'm sure you'd be aware there was a chatter about having a virtual event where we can announce this shared mempool stuff, but I'm not sure if I believe Cilius team are complete with their integration or rather implementation of the P2P thing, but there obviously will be some changes based on your recommendations to the spec. But if we can at least have a basic version ready, otherwise we might have to switch over the testnet probably to Sepolia anyway, given that Gorley is going to be decommissioned by the end of this year. Mm. Do you foresee us being ready by the end of November for that virtual event? Although I know there's no fixed date for it.
Um, I mean, that's too well. If it's like maybe the first week in November, that's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I know.
And given that the suggested changes, I mean, they're not huge. They should be, if you have the framework in place in your code, they shouldn't be that difficult to modify in there. But given that teams will have to make those changes and test those updates themselves before the network has the virtual event, it seems to me like the first week of December is kind of a long shot.
Okay.
But I also, well, it's worth bringing up that we're going to need a place to test regardless, like long term, regardless
Mhm.
of where we're testing the first week of December. I actually think it'd be just better in general to start with Sepolia. I know that we're lacking validator support, but we probably should start somewhere where we think we're going to be able to test for at least another
Yeah.
year, as opposed to start like testing somewhere that's going to be gone in a month or so. And so I would say we should just start testing on Sepolia regardless of when we start testing, just because we know it's going to be there. We can get everybody can be set up with Sepolia for their testing procedures. But yeah, it does seem to me like the first week of December seems a little ambitious here.
Okay, that's fine. So what I'll do is we'll set up a boot node on Sepolia in the coming week, and we'll share that in the Telegram group, and then we can test it out. And Utkir from my team should be able to work. I mean, as soon as your PR is approved, we'll start making the changes on our bundler to see if it's reflected. Yeah, we are compatible with that as well. That's then the other one was on the conversation we were having about the estimates. I was hoping either Yoav or Road would be in this call, so we can come to. The confusion for me is more to do with the CGL and VGL. Why there's such huge discrepancies across bundles, which I presume you guys are using binary search to arrive at the CGL, right?
Yep, we actually use binary search for both the CGL and the VGL.
And how do you ensure your responses, even though you're running binary search, is I mean, there's not much latency? Because we notice that if we were to do that, at least that's what I understand from Utkir, when we do binary search, it results in a delayed thing.
Yeah, we use contract helpers. So we'll deploy. We don't even deploy. We just in an ETH call, we use it in the we do like a what's it called, a state override, where we'll upload some code, and then that code will run a large portion of the binary search. Typically, we'll run like up to a certain amount of iterations of the binary search before returning, and so it cuts latency down a lot. We also run our bundlers very close to our nodes, so our latencies are a little bit less of an issue.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Sheriff, did you have a chance to run the same thing? I couldn't do that on Voltaire. If you can do that to see what your values are, that will help us in, I mean, ironing out these differences and ensure we have, I mean, all bundlers pretty much report the same estimates.
Yeah, okay, sure.
I will say I was surprised by how wide that spread was for something that seemed relatively simple. So I'll probably have someone on my team also look at those numbers and just see, if there is something weird going on. I think ours was the most extreme on both sides. It was like close to the lowest CGL and then close to the highest VGL. So it's worth looking at. I do think in general though, it's not, and I think maybe we should table this discussion because Yoav and Dror have the most context into what's going on here. But estimation doesn't need to be part of our really part of the consensus, or the really, which is the consensus here is our test suite. But it doesn't have to be, we don't have to have the same values there, but as long as every bundler's estimation passes every other bundler's simulation is the important part. And I think that is something that we might need to get into the test suite to make sure that as a bundler, you're estimating something that passes at least the reference bundler's way of doing simulation. And if that's the case, then every bundler should be either using the way that the reference bundler does it or requiring less gas during simulation, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but maybe we'll table that for Yoav and Dror to talk about.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. Go on.
But then first of all, I'm sorry that we didn't join yet simply because we are flying today. So we are arranging some things before our flight to Prague. So I guess that it is the reason why I couldn't join and why I'm still in a rush of doing things because I'm flying in several hours. And I assume that Dror is as well because we are flying together and Yoav is already there. So that's
Oh, I
why
see. I didn't realize ETH Prague was at the same time as Dev Connect. I thought it was a week later. Otherwise, we could have always rescheduled this call. That
yeah, we should have said something to the schedule, definitely. Okay, so so I heard you talking about the estimation and the simulation of bundles, and are you talking about estimate gas? And can you please like get me into the loop and understand what problem you're trying to solve?
No, we noticed last week where the estimate user operation for the same user op returned different values across all bundler implementations. And Yoav pointed out that this could be a problem when the shared mempool goes live, because one bundler might provide an estimate for a given user op and might have a different assumption that the user op is valid, but when it's passed on to other connected bundlers, the bundler could reject it because it failed in simulation and treat the connected peer as a spammer.
Yeah, that can be an issue, definitely. But first of all, why were these changes between like why does the gas differentiate between bundles? Do you know like how much does it? Yeah.
That is what we are trying to figure out because it's quite on the pre-verification gas. There's slight changes, but it's on the call gas limit and verification gas limit where we find completely different, I mean, extreme values. For example, I believe on the call gas limit, StackUp and Alchemy's implementation have the least, while Pimlico's is the largest. And it's what the difference, I would say, the range is somewhere between 700,000 as far as I know. So
Okay, that's a huge difference. Yeah.
yeah, so we are just trying to figure out what could be the reason for it. I mean, Utke from my team probably thought it could be because in at least in the case of call gas limit, Alchemy and StackUp use binary search to determine the values, but we found when running binary search, the latency is pretty high, so we did not use binary search. That could be one of the reasons, but we don't know.
Yeah, call gas limit though, it doesn't really matter as long as it doesn't revert when you're doing your estimate. Like as long as it doesn't revert on chain, then it doesn't really matter. It's verification gas limit that matters for the protocol at least.
Yeah, I mean, but call
for the
gas limit
mempool.
would have an impact on how many user ops you could submit as a part of a bundle, right? For the user op.
Oh, definitely, and that's part of the I believe, and Shaf, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is part of the change for the V7 entry point is we're now charging 10% for overestimation.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So yeah, while it is important for a particular bundler RPC to get a good estimation, like basically as close to actual as possible without overestimating by too much, I don't think that'll only just make their users have to pay more and then use different RPCs. So it won't fragment the mempool with like verification gas limit and simulation issues would.
Yeah, it shouldn't, but okay.
So yeah, that's what we. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no.
No, we were hoping to have a conversation around that and find, I mean, some common ground. But yeah, we can probably defer that to the next meeting and take it from there. And also, Dan has submitted a couple of PRs on the P2P spec, so we probably have to work towards that. But I mean, we were also chatting about the proposed virtual meeting towards the end of November or first week of December, and it's highly unlikely all teams would be ready with the shared mempool implementation by then. So probably we might have to defer that meeting maybe towards the beginning of next year, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It seems that most teams won't be ready until then. But I think that one of the things that can pretty much push teams to actually get the standard mempool is having not only the spec but actually a test suite, as you said probably before, just ready for them to actually have something to test against, to have just anything to actually test the implementation, because it's pretty difficult to implement something like that in a vacuum. So that's something that we are currently trying to work on. The thing is that we have also the new version of the EAP plus the native EAP. So we are currently working on multiple fronts. That's why it may take some time.
Okay. Do you have a likely date when version 7.0 would be released? Entry point?
Yeah, so actually we are not okay. I think that we are pretty much ready with at least the EAP changes and everything, and the entry point changes. We are currently trying to schedule both an audit and maybe like we are trying to finalize the formal verification and an audit, maybe through Open Zeppelin or another company. So that's why it will probably take some time before we are ready to release. But I think in terms of the changes, the scope of the changes, I think we are pretty much ready. Like we don't have any other changes other than the ones that are pending or the things that we already did. Like, we don't have any other changes that we are going to add there.
Okay.
Would you say then that the 0.7 entry point as exists on the Evenvenitism repo is ready for bundlers to start testing with? One of my concerns with these entry point changes is that if bundler teams don't have the opportunity to try to implement the change, or like try to get support for the entry point prior to us actually releasing the entry point, that the bundler teams won't have a chance to like get their feedback in, potential changes to the contract that might need to be made. I know that a lot of the code that actually impacts bundlers, a lot of the simulation stuff was all actually removed from the entry point itself, which should make this process a little bit easier. But I personally would prefer, before the code goes to audit, especially because we want to make sure that you're auditing what actually gets used, that bundler teams have a chance to play around with the new code. So is it ready? Do you expect changes to the contract itself?
Okay, so there are a couple of changes to the contract themselves. You can see them. I think that's what I'm looking for. I think that you can see what changes we're also going to make. The thing with it is that, first of all, we are definitely going to let you test it yourself and trying to integrate with the new, migrate to the new entry point. So we are not likely to just release it as in just to the wild after an audit or something like that. We're actually going to let bundlers test it. In terms of the changes, there will be some breaking changes. For example, we think about separating the user of on-chain, for example, from the user of off-chain, simply because, and I'll explain what I mean, that there is a difference between what the client and what even bundlers should get from a user and what is being packed on chain, simply because of gas calculations and just conveniency for the clients. For example, on chain we have a sort of like semi-packed version of a user operation. Like you have the paymaster and data on the same field. You have some gas limits that are being used multiple times. Okay, for example, the verification gas limit is used both for the paymaster verification gas limit and for the and for the account verification gas limit. So that's something that we wanted to add, and this is something we are adding. We are just thinking about how exactly we are going to add it, but we're going to have also another field for paymaster validation gas limit and the post-op of the paymaster gas limit. So it's going to have a different gas limit for just better granularity, so you don't have to have a huge amount of a deposit when you are actually committing to a validation gas limit. Because right now, again, the paymaster and the account are not separated, okay, in terms of the gas limit that they are getting. So that's something that we want to that we are currently working on. But the thing is that this change made us like just go into the direction that maybe off-chain, when a user asks for example, for a transaction, basically, and you can have a user operation off-chain that is part of the RPC request and everything, that you have separate fields for all the gas limits and separate field for the paymaster and then the data, and basically just have a more convenient packing for the user operation. And then on-chain, it will be more packed in terms of that we are going to squeeze several gas limits into one field and stuff like that, simply to reduce the gas costs. So that's something that is going to probably definitely break the current way bundlers and users are using it. Okay, the wallets, the current wallets and the bundlers are going to have to migrate to a different user operation. But again, if we are already adding fields for the paymaster validation gas limit and the post-op gas limit, then they are already breaking it.
Got it.
So
that one,
yeah.
I would love for, and I'm sure other teams would, because that is a change to the RPC, and which impacts a lot of code outside of bundlers. I feel like that should be the sort of thing that we should definitely get feedback outside of this, like inside this group and potentially outside this group on, just because that's not a trivial change for a lot of people who have written client code based on off-chain user operations. So is there a plan to kind of write that up and get feedback from the community on that one, or
yeah, actually that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have some kind of like POC without breaking too much, and just seeing how like getting feedback from people before we actually push it. But we definitely think that this is a step towards the right direction, simply because there are going to be these changes are going to be made either way when we go to a native account abstraction on multiple networks anyway. Okay, for example, on L2s and sidechains, you'd have to make these changes anyway. Okay, because we are adding a transaction type 4. Okay, and that's going to be a breaking change for all the bundlers and accounts and all the SDKs either way. So what we suggested is basically we want to standardize the way we are doing it right now in order for the eventual migration to a native account abstraction to be just like a different encoding, basically, in terms of instead of encoding the client requests from user operation, just like you see right now from a transaction in RLP to ABI encoding. It's not what you get from a client is not necessarily what you send on chain, right? It's not exactly the same. You have an encoding. So that's what we basically wanted to introduce here. Now the changes we are definitely going to get feedback on, but basically just as a general question, having a separate gas limits for the paymaster validation and the post-op functions, is that something that you think is worthwhile?
Correct.
Just having like currently verification gas limit, Okay, the user op field, the verification gas limit is used for the account validate user op, the paymaster validate paymaster user op, and is being used for the post-op gas limit, I think, as well, and for the account deployment. Okay, that's the current way that it's working. So I'm asking whether having a separate fields, two extra separate fields for paymaster gas limit for validation and the post-op function. Okay, just providing separate fields for them. Do you think that this is something that would benefit you?
To be honest, all I can think about is how it just adds another field that we have to estimate, because we'll have to actually come up with estimates for post-up gas now, as opposed to prior, there was just an assumption that if you're writing an account, your post-up gas has to use less gas than your validation step, which is a limiting factor. Although I have never ran into a user who has written a post-op function that used more gas than its validation.
You mean paymaster, right?
Yeah, paymaster. Like someone using our bundler. So we haven't had a paymaster attempt or someone writing a paymaster who's told us that they've had an issue with post-op limit being the same as validation limit. However, one thing that that is an issue with post-op having the same gas as validation is with regards to bundle packing, as we were just talking about earlier, where if you can provide a lower bound on post-op limit, then you can actually, instead of having to do this, currently it's actually 3x. You have to take the validation gas limit and multiply it by 3 if the paymaster is using a post-op. And that's how big the bundle gas limit has to be, or the portion. If post-op gas limit was able to be smaller than validation gas limit, we could pack more user ops in a bundle. So that's a potential win.
Yeah, that's something that we also consider. The fact that an account may have a very different validation functionality and than the paymaster, then it means that any paymaster has to have, like, if the account has a much higher validation cost, then it means that the paymaster has to have a much higher deposit to lock inside the entry point in order to accommodate that, because otherwise you're as a bundler you are now limited by the paymaster's deposit when you're introducing new user operations to the bundle from that paymaster. Like you have the limit. You have to take that into account, because as a bundler you don't necessarily know how much of this validation gas limit is going to the paymaster and how much is it going to the account itself. So you have to assume that the paymaster is going to use all of it, all of the validation gas limit that it gets, and then the amount of user operations that you can put in a bundle are just limited by the amount of gas that you're giving, the deposit of the paymaster divided by this validation. Right, so if they have a huge disparity between them, then it's an issue, especially if the account is also using it for deployment, then this validation gas limit is huge. And maybe the paymaster can have like just 100,000 gas, which is not enough for deployment and validation of an account, but it's just enough for it. Okay, so a different calculation here would mean that you can pack, as you said, like more user operations from this paymaster inside this bundle. And it can go vice versa, by the way. If the paymaster is a very elaborate one that does several Uniswaps and then trying to do some, I don't know, flash loans or stuff like that, I don't know. Like it has a paymaster pool and it has some logic behind it. Then the account now needs to have you pass to the account a huge validation gas limit. And by the way, that may be an issue when thinking about it. I'm not sure, but it may even cause the account to pay for an unused gas in this case. because the paymaster is asking for a huge amount that the account itself doesn't need, but because it's the same validation gas limit field, then it means that both of them have to agree on it.
Yep. Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's another field. It's another estimation that has to be run. It's another estimation that has to be correct.
So that's what I'm trying to understand, because you said that currently you don't run it, but this has the assumption that only one of them can estimate it, and the other one is fine either way. Okay, but
well,
it's not like
the estimation is that the post-op gas is less than, or the assumption, sorry, is that the post-op gas is going to be less than the sum of than what is in the verification gas limit, whatever it is, verification gas limit, which is the sum of the account and the paymaster's gas. And we found that assumption to, at least on our end, work so far. But
you can still use it,
agree.
by the way. If this assumption works for you, then you can. Okay, let's try to think what the flow is when building a user operation. So it really depends on what paymaster are you using, what service are you using. Is it a different paymaster? Like, is it a generic paymaster that is an external third-party service? Is it a paymaster of the DApp itself? But either way, you need to get these gas fees. Now, if you're asking your service right now and your service gives you the validation gas limit, it can also give you the same, just under the same assumptions, give you also the extra fields, right? You just fill in whatever you think is a good assumption here. Just instead of taking this assumption and putting it in validation gas limit, also do it for the post-op gas limit and the paymaster validation gas limit. Just say, okay, that's enough for it.
But likely we're going to want to add support for estimating post-op gas and then putting that into the estimate gas responses. And it's
what I'm arguing is that, okay, if this assumption is true, then it doesn't matter either way. If you also fill by this assumption, you also autofill these extra fields. And if this assumption breaks, it doesn't matter if you have extra fields or not, because if you, for example, in the current situation, in the current user operations track, if a paymaster doesn't support it, like if the paymaster, this assumption that the paymaster has enough for its post-op, then it also breaks in this current model, right? Because right now the paymaster won't have enough gas for the post-op if you don't ask it what it needs. Like, you don't really support this use case right now. So instead, what you would need, assuming we don't add these extra fields, you still have to ask a specific paymaster, a special one that needs a lot of gas for the post-op. You still need to ask him how much it needs. And then you need to actually get the max between all of these and put it as validation gas limit. Or am I missing something?
Nope, that's correct. I'm just thinking through the extra complexities this adds on to bundlers from an estimation standpoint. Because it is like, at some point someone's going to have to get that estimate, and we're going to have to write that code, which is it's
yes.
If we're going for 100% correctness in the APIs here, and we don't want to cut any corners with regards to, you know, just using that max or something like that, or just if we're trying to cover every use case, one of the things that like would be, you know, in that case that you just described there, is like, if there is a paymaster that's or if there is a paymaster that has a weird post-op case, they're using a ton of gas, then in my mind there should be client-side code that just says, hey, if validation gas limit or verification gas limit that comes back from the estimate is below this value, then just set it to this value. Like, to take the max off chain not off bundler in the client code to handle this special post-op case. So do some special handling outside of bundlers as opposed to trying to do everything in the bundler API. Is at least a thought. One of the concerns across, like, one of the hardest things to get right in 4337 has been gas estimation. So adding more fields to estimate is just adds complications.
Yeah, okay. So I agree. I totally agree that we have probably the biggest problem on your side and any service on like surrounding it is currently gas estimation of all fields. I just, the way I see it, we don't add extra difficulty here, an extra complexity, because if this paymaster already needs a spatial treatment because it has huge post of gas, then you still need to ask it somewhere somehow right now, and then just adjust the validation gas limit. So I'm thinking about it more like, okay, think about gas price versus max priority fee per gas and max fee per gas on pre-1559 networks. Okay, so if you don't want to support it, but you want to have the same, for example, the same interface, just if you just put max fee per gas equals max priority fee per gas, and that's it. That's the gas price. Okay, that having an extra field here doesn't really change much. It only lets you. It only lets you just have more granularity when working with an account and a paymaster. But I understand your point that it will probably, the difference here, it will probably just force bundlers to handle this issue right now. Okay, yep. To some extent.
Well, I think this all makes sense. I think it'd be great to see this in writing somewhere when you guys are ready to present your potential changes.
Yeah, that's what we are also working on, and that's what got us to think, okay, if we add this paymaster gas limit for user operation without a paymaster, it just, if we add it as extra to fields, it means that it's constantly paying for more on goal data than it needs, right? Okay, simply because it has extra fields that it doesn't need. Right now, a user operation without a paymaster just pays for the paymaster and data field. Okay, that is an extra cost for this all user operation. Now, when looking at all the user operations, the vast majority of them have paymasters. On the other hand, you still don't want to just remove this use case altogether. And so we thought about just packing them, okay? Because it makes sense to pack them, especially to save call data, okay? And then we thought, okay, if we are packing them, it doesn't necessarily mean that it should be packed on the client side. Like the client, for the bundler itself, it only needs, when it sends the transaction, to pack it into a field to actually have an encoding between the user operation that has paymaster validation gas limit, paymaster data, and all these fields unpacked, and then just do some kind of ABI encode to actually pack it into a transaction. That's already a layer that happens either way when you're actually sending a transaction, right? The RLP encoding, the ABI encode, everything is basically, you already do it. You just do it as part of the provider and part of an existing code that does it for you. So we thought that, just in order to save gas, we will take this extra step to do it and just decouple these ideas of an on-chain packed user operation and an off-chain request that the client sends. Okay, so I don't think that it should break a lot, but it will definitely change the way the current model works. But again, I think that because we are already introducing new changes and breaking changes to the bundlers, then it's not like you can support both V6 and V7 on the very same code either way. But yeah, we will share it, and definitely we want some feedback from you. It's always helpful.
Sounds good.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have anything else on the agenda. If anybody has any questions, we can. All right.
Yep.
Have a nice day then. Have a safe trip, Shaf. Speak to you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.